Well, thank you very much for calling in, colleagues. We have on the phone with us Hal Bunge, a colleague from Detroit Edison. Hal, you want to say what you do at Detroit Edison?
Sure, Michael. I'm a project manager for Detroit Edison. Mostly just build new infrastructure, substations, overhead line, underground lines. Pretty much I'm involved with about 3 or 4 substations every year in their construction. Interface with the planning of it, and then heavily involved in the construction and the closeout of it. Trying to get the stuff energized to serve customers.
How much are you controlling water heaters? I know you're doing something with residential, but I'm curious to know if you have your smart grid reaching into commercial establishments. That's obviously it's a large, complicated subject. I'm sure you're not on the front line of that one, but in general, what do you know of what Edison is doing with control of water heaters?
Well, I know we control residential water heaters, and during peak season, peak loads, if we need, if we're running short on power, we'll start to interrupt water heaters in our system. It doesn't happen very often. I know with the new smart technology that we're installing all over the place, I imagine a lot of that will move into commercial applications as well. It's just basically for peak shaving, that we're really interested in.
So the peaks during residential hours is usually what, 5 to 8 o'clock? Is that what we normally see?
Yeah, generally, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, all the way to about 7 o'clock when people come home and start turning on lights and stoves and start cooking their dinners. That's when you see your peak loads. Although, we've hit peak during the day too. I mean, it depends. Like weather can move in. You might have a really warm morning, and then about noon, clouds form, and then the load actually starts to drop off at that point.
Mm-hmm. So, what are you shaving? You're shaving, let me see, you have a 10,000 megawatt peak typically, and what do you think you're shaving off that peak if you were to change?
Probably, when I used to track that a little more, about maybe 200 megawatts you can actually get. But then, then it cycles too. So, and like I said, it may be, they may just interrupt water heaters in a certain location in our service territory. Like if the substation's having trouble overloaded or whatever, it'll be just targeted at that area to reduce the load on the substation.
So are they being controlled from substations directly? Where's the wiring coming from? Is the signal going back to the substation, or is it going back to some central command area in your central control downtown?
Central control downtown.
Yeah, okay. So they can flip a switch or maybe several switches and just, well, obviously you can't turn off 200 megawatts immediately, so they probably have some way of scaling into it.
Yes.
So, yeah. Well, that's another part of this. This seems to be directed largely to the mechanical part of using the DOE regulation to achieve these energy conservation goals. But I know that we could easily talk about could we manage our peaks a little bit better. This legislation, though, is and it's a large one, and it looks like we'll have another guest coming along with us. Let's see. We might want to wait until we start here. Hello, greetings from Ann Arbor.
Hey, how you doing, Mike?
Hey, Andrew. We're all set. So thanks for calling in, Andrew. You're welcome to sit in on this one, but I was just we've launched into the content part of our session here. So some of the sort of the theatrical issues we were talking about, I'll probably have to wait until next time. Is that all right with you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, okay, so you can log off here. And that largely has to do with the way we show stuff on the screen, Hal. So I don't want to get too much into that. We're trying to make these, it's a very complicated subject, and we try to make it visually interesting. And so we're having some resolution problems we're trying to get resolved. So Andrew's one of my experts on that one. So, okay, anyway, getting back to our topic. You can still hear me, Hal?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. Okay, so what I wanted to show everybody, and this is the part where it's going to be hard to see, is that we have a deadline of November 20th, I believe. And if I could find it on here, trust me, I've looked at that. One important point to remember is that there apparently is a I'll call it genealogy or lineage in how this concept is proceeded and tracked through federal legislation. So you can see some key dates here. Obviously, we're going back to 1992, and then there was some other follow-up legislation. So these are dynamic passages, so to say, and they're milestones in the way the concept tracks through our federal laws. So even though we seem to have a very short deadline, people who are close to this is probably the culmination of many years of work, which gets me to one of my main points here, and it has to do, and I'll get to what I've written here about what is important to us and what would constitute our written statements. I'll tell you that I'm not a stranger to this process. So, for example, I made a public comment on a emergency generator regulation with our hospitals, for example, and so we're relatively familiar with the regulation and with the way that the public is allowed to interact with federal agencies, and so this is how we do it, and we do find ourselves and our ideas tracking in the regulations.gov website. Depending on what the issue, there could be many of these. So this is the sort of federal equivalent of how you approach a standards development organization and try to get your ideas across. So it's likely to be a very contentious issue. It's likely to be one where there'll be a lot of stakeholders, and certainly people who have more time and resources than us will probably be making comments on it. So to that end, I've made a few, and I think I've got 12 main points here, and I'll run through them and I'll explain to them in a little more detail. Before I do that, I'll show you that the DOE has done a fair job of getting this laid out so that it's relatively easy for you to comment on. So I've had much worse, frankly. So what they do is they go through the text of this and they identify different issues. So you can see issue 7 there, you see issue 9, you can see issue, what's the next issue here? Issue 13 is right here. And it takes you all the way up to issue 34. Issue 34. I'm trying to see where that endpoint is. Issue 28, issue 29. Anyway, take my word for it. They identify 34 different issues here. For example, the last one, DOE seeks input on the approach and data sources it intends to use in developing the shipment model and shipment forecasts for this analysis. So I think they're looking at supply chain issues here. That's always an important part of what they need to look at. Since they have the ability to look at the bigger picture. So so that much said, there's an underlying foundation of legislation called the U.S. Technology Transfer Advancement Act, which basically says the Department of Energy or any federal agency has to do due diligence with existing SDOs before they propose federal legislation like this. So, and that's tracked. They're aware of that. They even say that somewhere up in here. This notice seeks to solicit information to help DOE determine whether or not national standards more stringent than those currently in place would result in significant amount of additional energy savings, and whether such amended national standards would be technically feasible and economically justified. But they do have this this mandate to look to the private sector first. So I've made that observation here, and again, these are the key points that would constitute one of the letters that we put together. Now, if Detroit Edison wants to join with us on this one, you're welcome to, Hal. But I make the point that it's very ambitious legislation, and the 34 points causes attrition, and meaning only the stakeholders who are able to deal with it are those, and those who are driving it, with a full-time legislative staff can respond to this. Now, I'm willing to be challenged on this. I can actually see in the regulations.gov .gov website how many other stakeholders had a chance to took the time to understand the legislation and to respond to it. But we always try to make the point that one of the larger stakeholders, that would be the public sector, user, owner, or final fiduciary, generally the person who has to pay both the utility bill as well as the boiler inspector, that person typically does not have the resources to respond to these. And so even though we are probably, education and healthcare is about 28% of the U.S. economy, and 20% of that is facilities, and 40% of that is mechanical, and this probably affects 10% of the 40% of the 20% of the of the 28% of a U.S. gross domestic product. So it's on the order of hundreds of millions to a billion. So when there's possible legislation that gets me into that order of magnitude in terms of avoided regulatory burden, or an opportunity to net energy conservation, I have to look at it. So that's why this one gets picked out of the dozen or so that come at my desk every day. So one of my other questions is that can it be broken up so that other standards developers can go through the process that takes parts of it to knowledgeable parties that can prepare ideas about product classifications? So you'll notice in the legislation that one of the key points here is, and I'm going to cut to where I think I'm going to go to where it's a little bit easier for you to see. If we go down here, they're asking questions about whether this DOE requests comments on whether the 155,000 BTU per hour input capacity, if that particular classification is still appropriate at this time in our economy. So that's a question, and I bring that to your attention because there are other documents that actually deal with that, and it leads me to my other observation here when I look at this is, here we go. It turns out that there are other organizations that do this. They don't mention the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. They have a boiler and pressure vessel code, and this one here seems to be the parent of many other smaller versions. Evidently they have there's a difference between power boilers, heating boilers, pressure vessels, and I very quickly get to the end of my knowledge of mechanical engineering, at least as far as boilers go. And so this is an organization, a private standards developer, and I would ask, why did they not track in this legislation? If their DOE is obligated to look at to see if existing standards are out there, was one ignored? Was one overlooked? Does one not count? And if any of those answers, if there's a yes to any of those answers, I would ask, have you approached ASME and asked them, could you expand the scope of an existing document? So I've got some information on that document right here. Where is the, here's the brochure. And, oops, sorry, where's the brochure? Let me go back, brochure. Here we are. So this is the sell sheet that they give you when they want you to buy what probably amounts to a $200 book, which is fine. They need to recover their IP. But here seems to be some fairly knowledgeable, obviously knowledgeable people that have been in the boiler business for likely hundreds of years. It all accumulates into this particular document. And why was not the ASME standard referenced? Also, there's another organization, ASHRAE. They're also in this business, and my question would be, they also have passages in their document, and I believe I found it here, service water. So this particular chapter is the current version, and the service water heating system, there are some criteria here. Performance requirements for water heating equipment. Now, is water heating equipment the same thing as the commercial equipment? I think it is, but not knowing all the fine points, it's not important to, my assertion is not based on that there's exactly a statement in this document that deals with DOE's concern. It's my assertion is based on the fact you probably have a knowledgeable group of people already that are developing this document, and ASHRAE is developed on a near continuous basis. they're what we call a continuous basis or continuous maintenance organization. So you can get changes in this in as little as 45 days. So why was not this particular, and this is 90.1, they do reference it. Out of fairness, they do reference it. But I don't know if a better job could be done by the people who are developing this. Now, I also recognize that it's a non-trivial enterprise to add even, putting a sentence in this thing is non-trivial. It's a very mature document, I like to say, and a lot of the ideas here are frankly hard won, so you have to respect how it came to be. I'm on an NEC, and I respect the tracking of hundreds of years or 100 years of knowledge through this. So I do respect the document. I like this document really to be the one where we get these ideas drawn out and answer to DOE's claims before we have a top-down mandate. And here's a chance for you to say something about electrical. I'm going to jump ahead here, Hal, and it's our experience with federal legislation similar to this was energy efficient transformers. Here we paid 2 or 3 times more for what amounted to maybe a 0.5% fractional improvement in transformer efficiency, but those transformers were already 3 to 5 times oversized. You're already, so you're changing, you're making a 0.5% change in watt hours wasted, lost, but the transformer is already much larger than it needs to be, so the money would have been better spent right-sizing your transformers. This is a chance for you to say something about the transformer legislation, Hal.
Right-sizing transformers, would that be commercial applications for, you're not talking about the,
not the big,
our large transformers at our substations?
No, it would be downstream, what we'll call building premises transformers. Yeah, go ahead.
For the most part, when I have discussions with our primary customers or secondary customers, they usually they never ask like, well, what's the cheapest transformer, or what's my savings going to be if I go to a lower impedance transformer and have less losses. That never seems to come into the discussion.
Now, are those your losses? Depending on the tariff and the ownership regime, those losses, you may own those losses or they may own those losses. I think you're mostly working on the primary side where the customer, where the customer would own that transformer?
Yeah, well, it depends on what rate you're on, whether we own the transformer or the customer owns the transformer.
Mm-hmm. I think you fell out of this legislation. I don't think the utilities went into this. I was looking for a way for you to say something about what we know of transformers. But I think in general, the utilities practice does not require the oversizing that the NEC does, for example. NEC, that's a lot of my paper's all about, and we managed to get some changes there. I've also...
Our transformers on poles that we install I would consider undersized. We always seem to run those quite a bit above the rating of the transformer before we just consider replacing them.
Yeah, you'll drive that because you can, right? I mean, you're peaking at 5 to 8 o'clock, and when you burn up a transformer, you can you just go in the shop.
Taking life out of it, and you're not losing much life on your day. Say if you're running your transformer, a residential transformer at 200% of its rating, you may lose 1% or a fraction of a percent of its life. It's not worthwhile to go and replace that with a transformer twice that size.
Well, actually, you bring up a great point that we can actually convey into the boiler area here, or the commercial heater. It's the lifespan of some of this equipment. If it's more efficient, have to ask that. I try to use, probably somebody from the Department of Energy is going to be seeing this, and I wanted to make a little pitch for get my project funded here. So that's a quick side take on this one. So we do have a project where we're trying to get our transformers right-sized, and we just need money to get the data. We all know that we can be much more efficient and save more energy if we simply get the transformers down to size. So no amount of energy efficiency can improvements is going to be as impactful, so to say, as simply getting right-sizing the transformers within the building, the non-utility transformers. So let's see, we're coming onto our time limit here. So getting back to some of the statements here, so I'll run through what else be relevant here. So I'm asking it, can it be broken up so the standards developers like ASHRAE can go through a process so that knowledgeable people can look at it? I'm saying, can DOE submit recommendations to ASHRAE and ASME to get these concepts tracking in the market before federal regulation? ASME would be a natural place to do it. As I mentioned, that there is this boiler pressure code. I always ask this question, which is another way of saying, is California doing it? I'll just leave it at that. Now, our mechanical engineers will tell us that your first cost, your product cost, is only one fraction of the overall energy conservation picture. And if you're drawing a control volume around the things you should within a building, these are the dominant factors here. How are you installing it? Where you're installing it? How it's being used, and how you're maintaining it. The product itself, very often, labor's right here. These two items here are large labor costs. Typically, it's twice as much as a product itself, as a rule of thumb. So they point out that you might do better fixing leaky faucets. The distance between hot water piping and the heater itself. There's a case to be made that these spot heaters have some merit. In fact, they even mention that somewhere in the legislation here, and I guess I would be supportive of that at a certain level, but I don't want to overstep it because I think there are trade-offs that the professional engineers know better than I do. So getting back to 70-degree water, some of our mechanicals say that there are many applications where we don't even need hot water, or the hot water pipe doesn't have to be as large as the cold water pipe. When the pipes are oversized, it takes forever for the water to get to the faucet, and so there's a fair amount of energy wasted there, or at least the water's wasted there. So our health people had mentioned that there's no mention of the Legionellosis problem. I get very quickly to the end of my knowledge on that one also. They say you need 140-degree water, and I know it's a rule of thumb that the health folks and the energy conservation activists are rather have how do I say, convictions. Much like the energy conservation and the fire guys have convictions about exhaust fans and kitchens and such and so forth. Here we have a fair number of reheat systems. I think that should be part of a picture, but the legislation seems to be focused principally upon a product, and so this would be an auxiliary product in many cases. In fact, I should mention, I'd like to add something here about district energy, and I guess I'm going to, we have district energy systems, and we're actually heating. Not everybody has it, of course, but it's something I should probably keep in mind here. Okay, so we talked about this. Why is this important to us? It's probably going to affect about 10% of our mechanical system budget. And finally, we have a week or so, and I've asked, what I'd be asking is whether our House, we have one of our legislators runs one of the House committees, and we'd probably be asking, we'd at least copying him this. Our government relations people will deal with this. We'll see what the content of my letter is all about and how that tracks itself up farther up the evaluation chain here at U of M, and also elsewhere in the industry. Now, all that much said, what you've heard me talk mostly about is how have we really done our best to get this done by stakeholders, users, a balanced arrangement of stakeholders. That's easier said than done, and my sympathies go out to ASHRAE and to ASME and to other standards developers, because a lot of organizations are cutting back on their support for the standards, what I call code writers and vote getters. And that's a problem, and it may well be that our system is threatened by the fact that we don't have enough thought leaders that are being financially supported and their careers nurtured so they can actually get out there and advocate on behalf of their industry. So it may well be that the market needs a little help, and I don't deny that. We can have a separate discussion about the degree to which the federal government does need to help the market. I'm not ignorant to the fact that market solutions aren't there for everything, and it does seem to be a very large piece of legislation, which is all the more reason I like to go at it a little bit more slowly. But that would be my thesis, and that would be there among a bunch of other, a number of other comments from the public. So what I've done in this document, and I think it's available to anyone else listening here, is that I've gone through the whole document and I have listed where the particular areas that are particularly of interest. These are all 34. These are all 34 comments that I pulled out from the document, and that makes it a little bit easier for people to evaluate it. Now, Hal, I know that you likely will not have the time to do this, but as we come upon our last 2 minutes here, I'd like to say I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful that you spent some time with me here.
Well, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I don't know if I can make too many more comments. I mean, the one that they wanted 140-degree water, I think that's because of bacteria. They don't want bacteria to grow in the water.
Yeah. Legionella is a concern for our safety community, especially in hospitals. And
yeah. Can you insulate pipes? Is there any insulation of the pipes itself to keep the pipes warm, or the water warmer as it comes out?
Yeah, let's put this in here. That's sort of under the rubric of installation, so pipe insulation. Yeah. If you draw the control volume out of a whole building water system, then you have to look at things like pipe insulation. But my sense of this legislation is it's specific. It seems to be focused on the product. And there actually is, they make some reference to an organization here. There's other legislation. I don't want to go into too much into your time here, but there is some product. Was it energy? Oh, here we are. The Energy Manufacturing Technical Corrections Act. So here we are. Maybe I probably exposed the fact that I'm doing many other things, the fact that I don't know enough about what this public law is about. That's why I'm hoping that my colleagues here in the next week or so will come around and look at this a little more closely. And this may well be some legislation that we need to know about, and it may well be that no trade association or ANSI standards developer can get to that the market needs federal help, but we'll have to look into that at another time. So, Hal, thank you very much for your time. I know that it's likely there's going to be dozens of more viewers of this video as the pattern seems to be, so as always, I invite others to attend these weekly updates. We'll have another one next Friday. I don't know if it's going to be interactive or not. I have to talk to my colleague Ted, who sends his Ted from Purdue. He's at Penn State right now giving a class. Normally he and I nominally host these together, but we have them every week. And as I say, that these recordings seem to be rather well attended. We've been doing these since July, and we have, at least as of today, 579 viewers. Excuse me here, Hal, just to belabor the point a little bit, we just had this teleconference last week at this time, so there was just Bob, Neil, and I, and maybe one other person. I forgot who was in on this one, but they were I moderated the discussion. We went over the kind of ideas we were trying to get across into National Electrical Code and the IEEE suite as far as reliability goes. It's important for hospitals because they're usually buying power in large chunks, and so we wanted to put numbers to those. So that's not my point. My point is that while it may only be you and I here today, it's likely by this time next week we will have 31 other viewers. So it helped to have somebody to bounce some ideas off here, Hal, and I'm very grateful for your time. And I'm going to turn the recording off so we can tell jokes for a moment here. So thank you very much, colleagues in the education and healthcare facilities industry. See you next week.